T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
On July 16, 1969, at 9:32 a.m. Eastern Time, the United States sent mankind to the moon and claimed victory in the space race against the Soviet Union. The message was clear. Mankind's future would not be on Earth, but among the stars. But in the darkness of night, a hidden problem had been silently growing that could destroy the future of space travel itself. And it's all because of space debris.
Debris from everything we've launched into space is clogging Earth's orbit.
Put that number between 500,000 and 1 million objects up there.
Rip through a satellite faster than a bullet and tackle space debris before it's too late.
Okay, so it's space debris. But what is the problem specifically? To answer this, I met up with my co-producer Noah at the Intrepid Museum in New York City so that he could help us explain the context behind this issue.
The beginning of space exploration began with a space race between the United States and the USSR. Since then, every year, more and more spacecraft have been launched into space, no longer just for the purpose of exploration, but for other purposes as well. Every day, we use satellites for communication, navigation, and other scientific purposes. And yet, these satellites are most at risk for being hit by space debris. So what exactly is space debris? Exactly what it sounds like, it's space's version of trash. Old, useless, uncontrollable objects that just float around in space. A typical piece of space debris may look something like this. But in reality, space debris is just a really, really general term. It can be something as small as this, or as large as this. Currently, the US military is tracking around 20,000 objects in space, and it has cataloged around 40,000. However, experts estimate that there are hundreds of thousands of objects that could be mission-ending in the case of a collision, and there are hundreds of millions of objects that could cause at least some form of damage. There are so many objects that even if we stop launching spacecraft right now, the number of objects in space would still increase over time. Most space debris actually aren't that large. However, it's important to remember that since they're in orbit, these objects are moving 10 times faster than a bullet. Even the International Space Station is only equipped with shields to deal with objects a centimeter in diameter. And yet, one of the biggest concerns with space debris is Kessler syndrome. The worry that a couple collisions will result in more space debris that causes more collisions in a chain reaction effect. Worst case, almost all of our space infrastructure gets wiped out and instead forms a deadly barrier surrounding the Earth.
So, if we don't get rid of space debris, then we literally may not be able to leave Earth, and it could disrupt our very way of life. In theory, we could just wait for all the space junk to come back down to Earth. After all, in low Earth orbit, which is where most of space junk is, Earth accelerates objects back down to Earth at 90% the gravitational acceleration that we feel down here. Yet it could take a piece of space junk decades to come back down to Earth. So, why does it take so long? The key part here is the speed at which space debris is traveling at. As Noah stated, the average piece of space debris travels at 18,000 miles an hour. So Earth's gravity is way too weak to slow something like that down. It's like trying to reel in a cheetah with nothing but your body strength. So, only when space junk slows down enough and loses enough kinetic energy can Earth's gravity pull the space object back down to Earth. But here's the problem. Up there in space, the only thing that is slowing down space junk is drag, which is when air pushes against the motion of a moving object. It's why if you run really fast, you can feel the air pushing against you, even though there may be no wind. But in low Earth orbit, the air density is way lower than that at Earth's surface, so there are way fewer air molecules to push against the motion of the space debris. Because of this, it takes a really long time for space debris to slow down, which is why it could take decades for space debris to fall down to Earth by itself. Okay, so we can't just wait for this stuff to fall back down to Earth by itself. I mean, even if we could, it would be dangerous because the space debris could hit, for instance, a building. So how can we solve this problem and save the future of space travel? My co-producer Caden will answer that question in detail.
Okay, so it's clear that we have to go up there and remove all the junk ourselves. But before we dive into this, there's a lot of stuff that's holding us back. The current web of international treaties poses the biggest threat to addressing the ever-increasing threat of space debris, as they are really complex, expose the remover to liability, and lack real enforcement or accountability. Article 7 of the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 states that launching nations are liable for any damage caused by their space objects or component parts. But what does that mean? What is a space object? Whose space object? I mean, these ambiguous definitions make it almost impossible for countries to reach and enforce agreements. On top of this, in 1972, the Liability Convention made nations liable for collision if they, whoever they are at fault. But without any real enforcement mechanisms, no one actually follows this. For instance, in 2009, a US active commercial satellite named Iridium-33 collided with a dead Russian satellite, damaging both and generating over 2,500 pieces of debris. Neither country claimed accountability, and in the end, the issue was settled via diplomacy rather than international law. There are also prevailing geopolitical and economic complications. Nearly all space debris removal technology can be used for both military and civilian purposes. As you can imagine, this creates much distrust between countries. So, how could we go about solving this complex problem? Ideally, we form an international space regulatory body to establish international norms in policymaking and funding. But in order to achieve such a lofty goal, the United States needs to take the lead and serve as an example to other nations. The president should take the initiative to form alliances and negotiate treaties with other spacefaring nations, provided that the necessary 2/3 of the Senate approves. For example, let's say the president negotiates an agreement to declare any country not taking action to remove their space debris as negligent operators. This would build on the Liability Convention by addressing both the risks of modern satellite operation while addressing the threat of increasing space debris. As a result, a precedent of accountability could develop into a global warming-esque cap-and-trade system. In such a system, an international body enforces the registration of satellites and provides a certain number of launch permits to every single nation, thus allowing for the collection of vital orbital information to prevent collisions while also increasing incentive to follow international law.
Okay, so international cooperation is essential to solve the space debris problem. And we as citizens need to compel our lawmakers to advocate for international cooperation. But what specifically can we do? Well, my co-researcher Arnab, who's been looking extensively into this topic, will tell us more about it.
Let's slow down for a second. Before anyone can form an international treaty to clean up space debris, there are 2 US agencies responsible for cleaning up space debris that should probably close that aforementioned technology gap first, right? As it turns out, what held back NASA from getting any debris removal systems into the sky comes down to dollars. Since former President Obama mandated that NASA or the Department of Defense do something, anything, to clean up space, NASA, the main driver behind developing debris collection technologies, has lacked enough funding to break these technologies out of the lab and into the atmosphere. NASA funded everything from grappling ropes, nets, and even small satellites that burn larger pieces of debris in the atmosphere and crash them into the ocean. However, it cut off funding for each and every one of these projects at what we call the TRL-4 development stage, which is a mere technological demonstration in a simulated lab environment. As expected, few of these technologies have ever seen outer space. What's needed to finally get debris out of the sky is a new and better interest group to send a message to members all throughout Congress and NASA / the Department of Defense that it's time to get moving on cleaning up space. Let's say we create an interest group called Crash the Trash, a group with the sole mission of sending the message to members of Congress and to the only people with access to the skies that it's time to start paying up and taking care of the skies whether they want to or not. Using informative pamphlets, good old word of mouth, and a catchy slogan, burn and crash till there's no more trash. We will raise concern amongst our peers about how nobody in power feels like doing anything about the metal scraps flying at breakneck speed in the atmosphere. and posing a potentially existential threat to all of humanity. Supporters, students, and organizations alike will partake in grassroots lobbying and call every representative and senator they know and inform them on the matter of worsening space debris pollution and why they have to act now, not just to clean up the sky, but to continue winning our votes in the future election. With enough calling and contact, members in Congress and NASA alike will know our interest group well enough that they will be forced to let us voice our desires to them. When we secure funding for more thorough debris removal technology development through Congress, we will also use our influence to work with NASA's regulators to shape the actions the administration takes with the newly secured funding going forwards in terms of developing active debris removal technology until they finally reach space and start working as intended.
So, if we as citizens effectively compel our lawmakers to advocate for international cooperation and necessary funding for space agencies, we can finally start to combat this problem of space debris, making space travel safer and our skies cleaner.